Hello, hello, and welcome to the Smart Elections Election Protection Forum. I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Elections.
And I am Benny Smith, Shelby County Election Commissioner in Memphis, Tennessee, and Technical Advisor for Smart Elections.
And we're going to give you a brief visual description for our visually impaired members. So I am a fairly pale white woman with bangs, kind of choppy, and long brown hair. I've got some hoop earrings and pink earbuds today in front of a brick wall. And Benny?
I'm a cool black dude. I look like I'm in my early 20s. I got a low haircut, and I'm wearing a flower white shirt, collar shirt.
We'd like to introduce you to our ASL interpreters. This is Alana Parody. I got her, Pilardi.
Pilardi.
Sorry about that, Alana. Okay, Alana Pilardi. And for a moment, I am going to pop on our other ASL interpreter. So here we'd like to introduce you to Emilio Hernandez and welcome both of you to do a visual description now. Emilio, do you want to go first?
Are you muted, Alana?
My name's Alana, and I am a white female. I have brown hair that is put up into a bun right now. I've got headphones with a microphone, a black shirt, and a blue background.
Well, my name's Emilio. I am a Mexican male, bald with black beard, black jacket, and a black t-shirt in front of a white background.
Okay, and then we will see Emilio later on. Thank you so much for being with us. Okay. And let's just tell you a little bit about us. So we are Smart Elections. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to elevating election reform to an urgent national priority, which we absolutely believe it needs to be. And as we head into the 2022 midterms, we think you're going to think the same thing. This is definitely a time to be focused on the elections and how we can make sure that they are secure, accurate, and accessible. And if you want to get in touch with us, you're going to reach out to contact@smartelections.us. We love to hear from you, especially if you're telling us positive things that you love about the forum and what you learned and how exciting the guests are or how much you like the new format, as well as any constructive criticism that you have for us. If you want things done a different way or you want improvements, we also really like to hear that. And one thing that you can also do is just put your comments into the chat throughout the show, especially positive comments or constructive criticism. Just put them right into the chat, and that way we do get those, we look at those, and you will see that even tonight we are really responding to comments that we've had previously. So one of the comments that we've had, thanks so much for that heart. Really appreciate that. One of the comments that we've had is that people would like to have more visuals and more information that really sort of adds structure to what we're talking about so that you can follow up on it if you want to follow up on that information or just have an easier time, following it. Thanks so much for being here. Scrutineers is a really cool organization.
Emily.
Yeah. Oh, shout out to her. They do a lot of really great work also, very similar to what we do. Emily Levy is the founder and executive director over there, and we're really excited that she's here with us tonight. So there's our email address if you need to get in touch with us. And I think that's pretty much what you need to know, except that we are going to cover a fair amount of material tonight. So we're going to be moving kind of lickety split. And one thing that we've done is I put the information that we're going to cover tonight into a PDF. And I'm going to go ahead and just put that into the comments. So here is the PDF for tonight's information. And you're welcome to jump into this now and follow along if that's easy for you, or if you want to take a look at it later or bookmark it. We hope that that is going to help make the information just easier for you to follow and process and absorb, and something that's going to be really useful for you. We want these sessions to be really useful experiences. Virginia Martin's here. We're going to be quoting her later on. She's a former election commissioner for Columbia County. Terrific to have her with us. Kate, Mark, the two Marks. Great to have you all here. Thank you so much. So we're just going to get started by taking a look at these visuals that we've created. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. And as I said, we have a lot of material to cover. So if I'm moving a little too rapidly, then you can just put a comment in the chat to slow down. But I'm gonna see if we can get through the material that we're hoping to cover here. So this is, just us, Smart Elections. If you want to reach us, you can see that smartelections.us. And I'm going to throw Alana up into the top there because we want to make sure that you can see what she's doing if you need those, if you need that interpretation. So that's our slogan, democracy is not a spectator sport, and we absolutely believe that, and we're glad you're here to participate. This is a little background about me.
In the Senate.
And what, Benny?
In the Senate.
In the Senate. We did go to the Senate. Yeah, we did a presentation at the Senate in 2019 where Benny actually did this pretty impressive live hack where he asked people from the audience if they wanted to choose who would win an actual election. And he had the actual election results from Tennessee. And
I was talking about Senator Friesdat.
yeah, I know, but that we brought our whole crew up there. It was really pretty fun. And we did this presentation for Senate staff. And that's available on our YouTube channel, which we'll share with you later on. So I have a background as an election security journalist, and I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more. I covered election security for more than 10 years. And what became apparent to me during that time was that we needed more people, not just covering this issue, but actually really educating and advocating for improvements. And so that is why I co-founded Smart Elections, and I am the executive director here. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that we're going to have quizzes, little quiz questions throughout. And we have these, a pen. This is going to be a small prize if you're interested in participating in the quizzes. These are custom made pens and they say ban barcode voting. And the only way that you can get this is by winning it in our quiz because no one else
Can I win? Am I banned? All right. I probably, yeah. Okay. All right.
Benny, you are not allowed to participate in the quiz. I'm sorry, but you're going to probably, you probably would win all these questions. And I started out with pretty easy questions, but we did get a pretty hard question at the end. So the questions get harder as we go along. And I think we're going to have one winner for the Facebook page and one winner for YouTube. And Amber, who's one of our volunteers, is going to be keeping track of that. So hopefully that should be a fun thing to do throughout this forum. So the first thing I want to talk about is just voting. How important is it? And does your vote This whole forum is going to be about whether or not Benny gets a pen now. I can tell. No, there's no information is actually going to be covered. We're all going to be focused on whether
I'm going to get that pen. I'm going to get that pen.
Okay. Does my vote count as I intended it? That really is the key question, right? You want to make sure that you vote and you want to make sure that your vote actually counts. And these are kind of the four pillars that might determine whether or not your vote counted as you intended it. One, is it on paper that has not been changed? So there are voting machines that are designed in such a way that the paper actually passes back under the printer after you cast your vote. So that is considered a risk by security experts. And that's something that potentially might make it so that your vote did not count as you intended it if it actually got changed by a voting machine. Was the vote counted accurately? In the US, it likely was counted by a voting machine. And we know that voting machines do make mistakes and they also can be hacked. So that's another point of, sort of a point of interest is when that vote was it counted accurately? Is the chain of custody secure? And chain of custody is something I think that Benny might speak a little bit about. We don't have a lot of time to go into it today, but just sort of put a pin in that and remember that chain of custody is very, very important. And you could think about this not just with voting, but with all kinds of information. We were talking with our team, and one of the women had done water samples for a water samples, testing water for an organization. And she said the chain of custody of that water was considered very important because they wanted to make sure that nothing had happened to it between the time they took the sample and evaluated it. So chain of custody is an overall concept that applies to many things, but it is very important with voting, which means that ballot that you voted on, hopefully it's a paper ballot, and has it been securely tracked from literally the moment that the paper ballot was printed to the moment that it is cast and counted. Those are all points that the chain of custody needs to be monitored and can go wrong. And then, is there a robust public audit to verify the count? And we're going to talk briefly a little bit more about audits when we get sort of toward the end of today's information. This is just an overview. And what I think we're going to do at the end of this is maybe take a vote, since we love voting, about...
Yeah, I'm winning pins. I got 2 votes for a pin already. I definitely think I like this concept.
We might take a vote from our members here about whether or not, about what segment you want us to jump into next. So you'll see we have any number of options about sort of how we pursue this information further. So it's time for our first quiz question. And this one is, what is the common term used for voting machines that combine a printer and a scanner in one unit? Now, those are the voting machines that I talked about, which are considered poorly designed by security experts, where the ballot can pass back under the printer. And there's a name for these. And this is a pretty easy question for most of the people who follow this, who follow our topics. So you can go ahead and type that into the chat. First person who types it into the chat gets it. What is the common term for voting machines that combine a printer and a scanner in one unit? I'm surprised. Kate Ray got it. Kate Ray, hybrid voting machines. Okay, so Amber put one down for Kate Ray there. Nicely done, Kate. Got yourself a point. Kate's in the lead. Okay, next up. And one of the reasons why we're just sort of calling attention to hybrid voting machines is because they are considered a security risk, and there actually is a fair amount of momentum in the country to try to prevent those voting machines from being used. So in New York, for example, our sister organization, Smart Legislation, has helped author and is advocating for legislation that will ban hybrid voting machines, while still making sure that voters with disabilities have full accessibility for a private independent voting session. And that's legislation that we're keeping a close eye on. Hybrid voting machines are something to be aware of. I want to talk next about how close are close races. And this is a diagram. I wonder if I can blow this up. I think I can. I'm going to blow this up pretty big and see. Not sure. Can you guys see that really big now? Benny, is that big on your screen?
I got like a 30-inch monitor. It's big for me. Probably not the best person to ask.
Is it bigger than it was?
Yeah, it is a little bit bigger.
Okay, I can't see that and see what you guys are seeing at the same time. So for example, this is a set of a list of elections that Virginia Martin, I mentioned, election commissioner in Columbia County, New York, put together, of how many races just in her one small county were won by very close votes. And you can see here, she actually did this starting in, I'm gonna make it small again. We popped ahead. She did it starting in 2001, and I'll read you some of these. Ghent Council by 2 votes. In 2002, a judge by 57 votes, not as close, but then 2003, a justice by 5 votes, a library proposition by 5 votes, a tied superintendent race. And then you can just see these moving throughout the years. There were races in 2008, there was a judge by 3 votes. So this is just to say that close races are very, very common, especially when you're talking about at the local level. And so that one vote, whether it's one vote that you cast or one vote that you wanted to make sure was counted accurately, can actually turn out to be extremely important. And that's why when we get to the end of our information tonight and we start talking about monitoring elections, all of this information that we're giving you tonight is in order to really motivate you to help monitor and to protect the vote. We're going to be doing different techniques, teaching poll watching, and we want you to understand that your actions are important, that by you helping to monitor the vote, by poll watching or participating in other ways to protect the vote, that can really help not only boost confidence, but also actually make sure that the candidates and the proposals that voters actually want are the ones that pass. And oh, we got a question here. That's interesting. Matt Lucine is asking, I would like to see how close races were before we introduced voting machines. I would think that they were probably still pretty close, but maybe Virginia Martin can help us. We'll put that question to her and see if we can come back from that next time. So I want to actually just take a few brief minutes and talk about one race in particular that was incredibly close. And this was in Virginia in 2018. There were actually quite a few races, but it turned out one race that actually determined the balance of power in the Virginia legislature. And this is a famous case, and it's actually just fascinating. So this was in 2018. Or actually, it was November 2017, but it was for the 2018 legislature. The Democratic wave in Virginia wiped out the Republican majority in the state House of Delegates. Democrats snared at least 15 seats in an upset that stunned members of both parties. Unofficial returns showed Democrats unseating at least a dozen Republicans and flipping 3 seats that had been occupied by GOP incumbents who did not seek re-election. 4 other races were so close that they qualify for a recount, and the outcome will determine control of the chamber. The results marked the most sweeping shift in control of the legislature since Reconstruction. So this was a huge, huge election in Virginia. And there were numerous races that were very close. And the balance of power in the legislature actually hung in the balance. And it hung in the balance, as it turned out, by 1 vote in this rare tie-breaking vote, a vote that looked like this. And I want you to see this. This person had voted, they had filled in 2 bubbles, and then they had apparently put a slash through 1 bubble. Oh my God, our hacker is back here. Let me just block this person. I don't know why, but this person just loves to
strip out clothing on our chat line.
Okay, back to business here. So, I mean, just take a look at this. This is just a crazy, crazy ballot. This person had voted for this member of the House, and it's a little unclear what they intended. Did they intend to vote for Shelley and then just change their mind and vote for David, the Republican, instead? Or were they just confused and voted for 2? Or was that a stray mark? Was it an overvote that because of bad chain of custody, someone had been able to, to get a hold of that ballot and change it in some way? So this was very, very kind of high stakes tied race, and the balance of power in the Virginia legislature hung on this one race, and it turned out on this one vote. So what they did, they went to court. The Democrat actually wanted this particular vote disqualified because that would have put her in the lead, and the Republican wanted the vote counted for him because he said that her vote had actually been crossed out. They actually went through, I think, 2 rounds of judicial evaluation, and eventually the justices said that it was a vote for the Republican, which put the vote into a tie. And the whole balance of power in the Virginia legislature was now in a tie, and they actually pulled one of the names from a bowl, and it turned out the Republican won in that poll. And so the Republicans still control the legislature. But this is just to say that races can be very close, and they can be extremely, extremely significant. Any comment on that, Benny?
Yeah, I'm looking at the rest of the ballot, and this is why I advocate for paper ballots so much, because what the choices were and what was chosen is enshrined there. And I was looking at the other ones. It seems that whoever voted, they were voting for Republicans, and there's one where they voted for a Republican and they circled it in and X'd it out at the same time. And I was like, did they cancel it? I don't know. But it was the only choice, so you would think it counts. So intent does matter, and a few court rounds is better to determine it than, left the machine and you don't know what happened.
Right. So I'm actually going to get into that. So it is actually, that was actually the first election that Virginia was voting with paper ballots. So imagine if it had come to this and they had still been voting with ballots.
The machine would have said it's over.
That didn't actually have paper ballots. So what I'm going to show you next is what happened right before this. So this was in September of 2017. Virginia had touchscreen voting machines and actually considered some of the worst in the nation. And they had actually looked at the results of something called DEF CON, which is where a lot of the voting machines around the country had been pulled together for a conference of hackers. And after Virginia saw its voting machines hacked at DEF CON, they actually mandated that all of the voting machines that did not have paper ballots be decertified. So again, this is just to say that the work that we're doing as election security advocates actually makes a difference. The work that was done at DEF CON made a difference. States did change their protocols on the basis of that. And we did have, we had elections which had more reliability because those paper ballots were being used.
15 seats had a
there were
reverse in the fortune
in Virginia. It was a huge election. So many after they
what about those machines
went to paper ballots, they did have a huge change of power. Now, I talked to Andrea Miller about this, who is somebody who many of you know. We've had her on the show, and she does a tremendous amount of work, especially in the South. And she said that there was a massive voter turnout campaign in Virginia, and she put the shift in power down to that. But we will never know if it was a combination of turnout and changing from electronic machines to paper ballots, because there really is no way to track what was going on with those electronic machines previously. So now I actually was at that DEF CON, and I want to just play you this video that I made from that DEF CON. And I think it'll give you a good sense of why we're so suspicious of voting machines that vote only with electronics and not with paper ballots. So we're going to go ahead and take about 3 minutes, and we're going to just watch this video that I made from that 2017 DEF CON. And if you pay close attention to this, the information about the next quiz question is coming up. So this is a good one to pay attention to.
Harry.
This is the voting machine hacking village. We have election machines, we have voter registration systems. People are free to hack. They are free to open to these machines. We can experiment, and we can do tests which are risky.
It's working kind of, but it's not 100% working normally.
This was my idea. I called Jeff Moss, the founder of DEF CON, and said, hey, you know what might be fun this year? We should hack voting machines. He called me back and said, all right, let's do it. Our next speaker is Harry Hursti, one of the foremost election security experts in the world.
The first hack was a professor from Denmark who was able to take control remotely over Wi-Fi.
I haven't touched the machine. So here, this is the machine. You can ping it. Okay. It says, hello, I'm there. You can select our exploit. Okay. And we are in. Okay.
So these guys with this electronic poll book have already gotten access to the database.
We can add fake voters, subtract voters from the voter record, vote multiple times.
They own the database.
Thank you, VMware. Good job.
The poll book attack is actually one of the things that I personally am most concerned about. One of the biggest threats to voting is to just make it so that there's chaos in the precinct on election day. These guys could now do that if they wanted to.
We were working on Diebold AccuVolt TSX. We identified most of the chips on the board, and then we dumped the data off of 2 of the memory cards. I think we would eventually be able to manipulate the votes. We would have to either modify the memory card data, which seems to be completely unencrypted, or if we can look at the firmware, we might be able to basically install a virus on there, which would also allow us to modify votes. Somebody with more experience could probably do this in about a week.
This tray comes out.
Oh, all right.
So,
And I'll hold it. You have to get the screws
yeah, this comes out somehow.
Does it?
It feels like it could.
That gives you an auxiliary port.
So it's a PCMCIA card?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. They haven't used this in a long time.
So if you know what to write to it, we could write with that and stick it in. So I don't know what to write
This is going to go right in here.
Yeah, that's how they load the data.
This is the binary, and then over here you can see the names and their redundancies, which means I think almost definitely each one of those is one write-in vote. The actual vote names are in plain text in there.
It is very, very accessible. You can get right in, write whatever data. If you have access to this card, mind you, it's a card that's inside the machine, but if you can get access to that card, you can make it say whatever you want.
Most shocking of all, everything we discovered is basically still out there alive and vulnerable.
Yeah, we still got the TXX here.
Yeah, you're still voting on that machine that he was talking about. You're
Yep.
still voting on that in Tennessee, right?
They were gonna pick a district attorney and like 40 judges with it.
Yeah, so those machines are in use. And it's interesting also that, you know, people often, the vendors will say, well, this isn't really real life circumstances because they're in there and they're, you know, taking the machine apart and they wouldn't have access to that in the polling place. But what they really don't understand is that that's all preliminary. That's all something that a hacker does ahead of time. You can buy these machines on eBay, clearly, because they have them at the voting village, and then do the research that you need to, and then figure out an attack that's either remote, the way Karsten Schurman showed a remote attack there, or an attack that could be done, say, with software that comes in through an official update. That's one way we know that millions of machines have been attacked, from official software updates that get viruses in them, or from an attack actually in the polling place, things like that. The link to that video, absolutely, no problem. I just actually closed it, but if you download the PDF has that link in it, Emily. And I might actually be able to just grab that real quick from links I just sorry, I just closed it, but it's in the PDF. So, for example, there is a machine, a voting machine that is in use across the entire state of Georgia right now. It's called the Dominion ICX. And J. Alex Halderman, who is a computer science professor at the University of Michigan, did a security report on that machine for a lawsuit that's going forward by the Coalition for Good Governance. And that report apparently is so worrisome that the judge actually has sealed it. And no one has been able to see it except the attorneys in that case, because Halderman said that the machine is extremely vulnerable, apparently to even an attack by one voter in the voting location. So these are machines that are in use and are considered very vulnerable, and they are in use throughout the country. And that is one reason why, again, I'm emphasizing we are encouraging you to get involved in poll watching, to try to we have devised different techniques to verify that the results are accurate, or to at least do checks on them, and also to advocate for better systems in your community and to advocate for meaningful, robust audits. So those are really the key points when you're thinking about a broad overview of election security: is better equipment, less vulnerabilities, and means of checking that equipment. You want to add to that, Benny?
No, I think that's as clear as it gets. It definitely needs to happen.
Super, yeah. And what's your timeline in Tennessee for trying to get paper ballots there?
We're in the courts, so
You're in the
we're currently The Election Commission is suing the Board of County Commissioners to force them to purchase ballot marking devices.
So the Republican state legislature is trying to force the local election commissioners to purchase ballot marking devices, which are less secure and that you don't.
Almost. The local election commission, of which I'm a minority member, is suing the Board of County Commissioners, which is the funding body of Shelby County, to force them to use their funding authority to purchase ballot marking devices.
The commission that you're part of is trying to force.
Yeah, I lose every time. That's what I did for 2 years. I tried to force the issue and give as much knowledge as I could to the public about the use of paper ballots, but it's a 3-2 majority, and they voted 4-1. They even had a Democrat commissioner to vote with them against me.
I'm sorry to hear that. So when are you going to find out about that case?
It's in appellate court now. I think the county does have the ability to purchase whatever it wants, and the election commission has the ability to request what it wants, and a court is going to decide what to do when both of those are in conflict.
So as you can see, these are extremely complicated issues. And at Smart Elections, we're very much aware that ballot marking devices are needed as a part of the election landscape. Voters with disabilities need those ballot marking devices in order to vote. But we are trying to make sure that ballot marking devices, when they are set up in as secure a way as possible. Generally, that means totally separate from a scanner that counts the votes, because we talked about this earlier about hybrids. You don't want a printer and a scanner in the same machine. And also that ballot marking devices are not in universal use, not for all voters. What voters want is options, and many voters want, and security experts recommend, that if they're able to, voters vote with hand-marked paper ballots. And so that's why we do not support a universal use ballot marking device for all voters. And in general, also those systems are more expensive and create much longer lines as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're going to go through this year. This is our biggest election year, and we are going to have about 70 or 80 races on the ballot. So you're trying to get 100 people an hour through 6 machines. It's not going to happen. But you could set out 100 tables. I mean, you set out 100 desks, and you can move them all through in 20 or 30 minutes.
Right. If you have the hand-marked paper ballot, that's why that system is much faster, because people can vote at the same time.
And they can take their time.
Needs to vote on the machine. So we have a question here. This is a very sort of advanced question. Dominion ICX vulnerability is that when configured as a DRE or a BMD. So my understanding in Georgia, they are using the Dominion ICX as a ballot marking device. It prints out a paper ballot, and then they take that paper ballot to a scanner. So the DRE, for people who aren't familiar, is a direct record electronic. That's when the vote is recorded directly onto the computer. Ballot marking device is when it's going to print a paper ballot.
And that's an antiquated technology. Only places like Shelby County use those.
The DREs, for the most part, they are getting phased out.
Georgia had to replace what we use here with what they have now. So a cool $100 million later, we got a sealed report saying it's all bad.
That is why security experts recommend hand-marked paper ballots for voters who are able to vote by hand. Okay, so we're gonna, we are seeing your chats, yes, to that, hey, you search fractional voting on DuckDuckGo person in the chat. I love our members. They certainly have a sense of humor. Benny, your volume fades in and out. So
okay. I got to pull this thing up. I thought I had it too low, and I guess it was too low.
Address that. Meanwhile,
George, tell me if it goes down again. I just didn't have it up this time.
Okay, we're gonna try to keep rocking here with our presentation. So that video that I did, actually, just again with the theme of the work that we're all doing here together is important, does make a difference, does influence things. A media outlet called Now This picked that video up and put it on Facebook on their page, and it got almost 2 million views. This was around 2018, when people were just becoming aware of what had happened in 2016, how the voting process had potentially been interfered with, and a great deal of awareness started to come because of that. And I was just one of many reporters who were reporting on that. But the reason why I got to be at DEF CON was because a bunch of people like you actually sponsored me and, put together some funding for me to go and do that. So all of this work that we're doing together, it really does pay off. People are starting to understand these issues more because of what we're doing. Okay, here's our next quiz question. What is the name of the hacker who is featured in the film Kill Chain and is one of the organizers of DEF CON? Now, if you were just watching the video, you will know this. First person in the chat gets the point. You can put in to the chat on Facebook or on YouTube the name of the hacker who is featured in the film Kill Chain and is one of the organizers of DEF CON. This is still in the easy questions.
Yeah, that was easy.
Okay, we're going to move on if nobody gets the point.
Somebody knows this.
Okay, Perry. Awesome.
Perry, there you go, Perry.
Harry Hursty.
What's
okay.
up, Perry? I ain't heard from Perry in a long time.
Okay, it looks like we have one on Facebook and one on YouTube. So Amber, please take note of those. We got 2 winners for that round. Okay, moving on. We're just going to talk briefly about what's at stake in an election. I think that most of you are aware of this, but these are really, really big stakes, high stakes. The candidate who wins gains power, control of committees, they set the agenda, they influence whether or not bills get to the floor, and they impact our lives with their decisions. And the perfect example of that is that when Trump won the presidential election, he appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, not 1, not 2, but 3. Totally changed the balance of the court. So these are high stakes decisions. And we're going to give Benny a few minutes now to talk about redistricting. This is Benny Smith, election commissioner in Shelby County, Tennessee, and a software developer. And Benny, the floor is yours. I'm going to put your slide up first.
All right. So it's the first time doing this. I guess this is by request. So I abdicate and would say to the public, if you guys have a subject that you would like us to talk about, please feel free to provide feedback or suggestions, and I can tinker around in my brain and provide a brief explanation of how I see it during these segments. So redistricting is something that is quite the topic these days. If you guys can see my wall, there's like 8 by 11 maps plastered all over my wall because I'm going through the redistricting process as a Shelby County election commissioner. But what is it, right? It's a process that reflects the population changes, and that is used by legislatures and legislators to equitably allocate representation for Congress, House members, and your state legislatures. Well, you may say, well, why is that important? Well, actually, the federal constitution requires it. We are a representative form of government. And if you just consider the consent of the governed, we need equal representation. We have communities, there's racial diversity, and fair representation for the voting power that will send representatives to these branches of government to carry out our interests. Let me give you a fun fact. There was a decision, Baker versus Carr, and that originated from a court case in Shelby County, Tennessee, where Baker sued Tennessee to establish electoral districts of equal population. And that's where we got the term one person, one vote. Look it up, it's a fact. So the next topic is, maps are drawn in Tennessee now. So what does implementation look like? And it's very different when you have to do the work. So for my job, it's staff, but me and the chairman, Brent Taylor of the Shelby County Election Commission, we appointed a liaison to serve as a technical advisor to our county governments, not to make sure they weren't drawing the lines based on political lines, but not to take a position either way as to give them any advice of what, when they move the line east to west, if it brought more Democrats or Republicans in, because you're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to just be population. And he was more of a timeline manager because there's a lot of additional steps that have to happen. So in Tennessee, and it's probably very close to the same way everywhere else, you have your state Senate who draws their lines. You have the state house who draws their lines, and that's at the state level. Then you have your local county government who draws their lines, and then your municipal city council who draws their lines. So that's 4 sets of lines being drawn. And from that, the implementation is how do you gather and create precincts to house all of those districts and give equal population representation, because all you have is precincts to do that. So there's a timeline where you have to get all that submitted back to the state. So we thought it was prudent to appoint someone to kind of help marshal that process along. And when that happens, you create new precincts to reflect those boundaries. And sometimes there's a term, and I'm probably not going to go into it in depth tonight, but they're called splits. And that's a term that everyone should be familiar with if you're concerned about how elections and the electoral process is carried out. And that's where you split a precinct. And the best example I can give is I live on a street, and maybe 2 blocks over, someone who has the same precinct as me has a different state representative. And the reason why is because that was where the line was drawn in between a neighborhood that split off the representation from one group to another. And that happens. It's a small nightmare when you have to execute it, but it's a necessary part of the process, and you want to make sure that part is fair and equitable. Let's put it that way. And then you guys question, Lulu?
No, I was just, one of the things that you said to me that really struck me was that you're going to have to change the precincts where people have voted for decades and decades, and they're going to
I'm
be
going right there.
lost and
I'm going right
confused.
there
Yeah.
now. Yeah. So in Shelby County, we changed our precinct naming conventions, and we also began with the process with 170 precincts, but we eliminated 40 precincts, which is literally 1/3 of the precincts. And that really gives me heartburn, because what that outcome looks like could seem nefarious. It could be prudent on behalf of the administration. It could seem very tone deaf for the electorate. I'm more in the tone deaf camp, but I get it. I see why you do some of these things, and it only happens every 10 years. So you have to have that type of administrative function happen during this time. But what you would end up with is take my mom, who's been voting for 35 years, and she's always picked her same House member, and she's always gone to the same voting precinct. Well, if that precinct is eliminated, then she's going to, if she doesn't have any media or didn't check herself or happen to catch a commercial or get something in the mail to say, hey, we just move you 8 blocks away, or we move you 2 blocks away, she's going to do her normal human creatures of habit, and she's going to try to vote at her regular precinct, and it's going to be closed. And that is very problematic, especially when you deal with the types of races that are up on the ballot this year, which is where you're picking your district attorney and judges, and those really shape the way the execution of the functions of government work in the county. So if your precinct is changed, the best way to know it is to be in contact with the local election commission. I would not leave it up to the staff. It is hard to draw the lines and communicate it because there's so many different mediums of way people can consume information. So there are people who are going to be left out of the mix in the communication process. But I would look for the local election commission in like a search portal, or emailing them directly or by phone, asking, after redistricting, did anything about my voting process change for me, and can you give me what that information is? Our county, I've been quite loud about it, but we're trying to ramp up PR and trying to reach out to as many voters through media and potential town halls. I'm probably gonna be on every radio station, everything, trying to explain, because a lot of people will say, well, this is voter suppression. You made the precincts smaller. you eliminated the name state precincts, but the population moves and it shifts. So some of that is administrative in function, and some of that could have probably been a little bit more sensitive to be applied, but that doesn't make it bad. But nonetheless, with the state, I always say now, like I catch myself saying it all the time, that the election belief system it's got the same statistical profile of a coin toss, and that's really problematic when you consider that 50% of the election, the election's voters don't believe the outcome. So you got 50% who believe and 50% who don't. I mean, that's a coin toss, and democracy should not be regulated or relegated to the statistics of a coin toss. That's just problematic. So you will have a lot of people, just by virtue of having a district change, think that this is some way to make that less competitive. And you cannot talk about, most people identify redistricting with gerrymandering. So you cannot you cannot ignore that. It is real. History is replete with court cases that have figured out that you can do some surgical precision to make districts less competitive, to slice districts in a way that makes it comfortable for the politicians who are running for their elections. Every politician is afraid of the next election. I think that's the biggest fear for a politician. So if you had the choice to draw a line to make it easier for you to just win, you probably would take that. So that is something that's why the public should be involved and paying attention to this part of the process. There are other scenarios where this can result in unfair practices. And I don't want to go into those necessarily tonight, but there are examples where you could take advantage of the fact that most citizens, like if you go back to my mom's example, she's been voting for her House member for 35 years. Well, if the district change and now she has a new House member, she's going to be confused by that, and then that confusion can allow for some gamesmanship that would really be uncomfortable. But a paper ballot is a solution to that. So I think that's a good primer on redistricting. We'll entertain any questions if people want to understand that further. It is something that we should all be aware of. It is very real when the population moves, because if we see a wave of Senate changes or House district changes, a lot of the changes that happened in 2012 was attributed to the 2010 redistricting. There's a whole movie on how it was the Republican Party used surgical precision to create these districts that gave them these competitive advantages because they were in charge of drawing the lines. And I always say, if you look at the swing states, although they went for the presidency as a Democrat, the House legislatures largely remain Republican. So they are again in charge of drawing the lines. Not to say that there should be some nefarious expectancy because they have that power, but that would be some power that I would want if I was going to do anything good or bad. That's an incredibly powerful position to be in.
Right. And we can come back to redistricting. We can probably, one of the things is we're going to be asking people what they're really interested in focusing on. But if we have the interest there, then we can spend a little more time on redistricting. So thanks so much for that deep dive. That's our new segment, Benny's Brain. And we did have a question that came up, really more a comment. We need to have multi-seat ranked choice voting. It gives almost everyone a representative and minimizes wasted votes. That is, votes that are not needed to elect someone. And we actually had a really interesting program with a guest who talked a lot about that. Your colleague, Benny, do you want to remind us about that?
Yeah,
program?
Professor Steve Mulroy, who's running for district attorney.
Oh, he is?
This year. Yeah, he's running to be a local prosecutor here. Is an absolute adroit aficionado when it comes to redistricting. He literally wrote the book on redistricting. He is someone who is probably a savant when it comes to talking about the representation that comes when you allow for a ranked choice election. I'm still a little bit of a skeptic, but I get the concept of why it is definitely what the commenter was saying. It does offer the breakup of the majority or the majority parties. It does give way for more independent elections or independent thought. These groups that have differing views that are not in the status quo.
So I just threw that into the chat there. That's our interview with Steve Mulroy. So you can take a look at that if you're interested in finding out more about that. And then we're going to just move along here. And we have another quiz question. So this is a quick quiz question around 2014.
I know.
Smith spent a year examining the software and hardware of one voting machine vendor. Which one? So again, I tried to keep these questions pretty straightforward. I think there's a number of people who will know this. So just put it into the chat if you think you know the answer to that. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is kind of the difference.
Mark,
Dominion. No, it wasn't Dominion.
Dominion owns the gyms.
They do now, but they didn't own it then.
All right.
I might give him half a point for that.
Oh,
but
so you making it a hard question. Okay, you got to get
SNS, no.
you're going for the original manufacturer.
The original manufacturer of the system. That Benny's a little bit of an underground rock star because of this research that he did. So I thought somebody would know this. So keep trying.
Oh, it's a trick question.
I'm giving Mark half a point for Dominion because they do own some of that system now. But if nobody gets it within a couple minutes, I will let people know. So I want to talk a little bit just about the contrast between what we were taught about voting and no, everybody's saying ES&S. That is not correct. Kate Ray, Diebold.
Diebold, yeah. I think George Ripley got in before her.
Did George get it? Oh, okay. Yeah. So two. And okay, so George actually got it. So George gets the point on that. Diebold is the machine that Benny studied and actually discovered a method of counting votes with fractions on that. Oh, now we got a bunch of people, scrutineers came in there too. Okay, now everybody's in there. But George was the first one with that correct answer. Amber, that's a point for George Ripley. Now, we want to talk a little bit about kind of like the difference between what we were taught in school and what it turns out elections are really like. And I'm going to take this moment to play this little video that I found on YouTube, which I think gives a pretty good example of what, you know, I feel like this is kind of like what we all thought elections were like when we were kids.
Put on your mittens and your coat.
Go out and rock the boat!
Get there by car or bus or boat.
Go out and rock the boat!
Email your friends from coast to coast.
Go out and rock the boat!
It's coming down. The next 4 years are up to you. You'll change the world by what you do. I hope you are registering. Your vote's the most important thing. Your vote is the most important thing. I wrote this Schoolhouse Rock. Now it's your turn to rock the vote on November 4th. Register now. Here's how.
Okay,
and
so
Smooth Out of Country was 50% red and 50% blue on that video.
That's what we thought voting was like. But in fact, what voting is really more like is this. And this is a book. We had the author on this show, Deliver the Vote. And his name is Tracy Campbell. And I have a link for you also where you can watch, where you can read his book online, because it's apparently about $600 at Amazon because it's out of print. But Deliver the Vote will give you a much more realistic assessment of what our elections are really like. And it turns out that our elections have been very troubled from the very beginning. It's been a lot of foul play and people really trying to take advantage in almost every state, in almost every way that you can imagine. I think my favorite example is in New York, where they telegraphed the entire contents of the Bible to keep the actual election results from coming through. So, just like so many different dirty tricks. It's really,
Gotcha.
it's just almost more than you can imagine. But this book is just fascinating. I cannot recommend it highly enough. So this is, I'll put the link into the chat where you can read this book online, Deliver the Vote. And I'm also going to put into the chat the interview that we had with Tracy Campbell, because definitely worth watching. Tremendously fascinating scholar, Pulitzer Prize nominee, who is very open about kind of how depressing all of this was to research and to write about, and how it really changed his impression of elections. But I think you really have to start with that. You have to start with the reality instead of the fantasy of what we all thought elections were like. And then you can start to move into what we can do about it, which is what we, what this work is about, that we're all doing together, is how can we really move forward with that knowledge. This is a really great Substack that I'm going to encourage you to take a look at. Kim Zader, if there is one person who can really give you an update about election security and what's going on, if you just even want to do, if you're like, looking for good reading material on a weekend,
Hard hitting.
Just Google Kim Zader and start with like her 2003 articles in Wired, where she covered Diebold and problems in Georgia, and then just move through her career. It will teach you so much about election security. What she's covering now on her Substack is fascinating. She's talking about current viruses that actually mask as a ransomware virus. And then while they're pretending to hold your information hostage and you're trying to pay the money, the virus is actually just wiping out all of your data. So really recommend that Substack for Zader. And I'm going to put that into the chat. She's a great person to follow and to just read her entire archive. Really strong person on election security. There's lots of really good authors, but I would put Kim Zader at the top of the list. We're going to talk about vendors and technology. We're almost out of time. Benny, your redistricting section was like...
You told me to take 10 minutes. I know I wasn't 10 minutes.
So we're running out of time, but here's the main vendors. ES&S, Dominion, Hart, InterCivic, Clear Ballot, and Democracy Live is starting to get some traction. We're looking at one of their voting machines here in New York. They're going to be applying for certification for their ballot marking device, a standalone ballot marking device that I think many people here are interested in. And if you really want to know who are the dominant players, it's ES&S and Dominion, and they control 80% of the market. And one of the great websites to go to if you want to know more about voting technology, verified voting, I'm going to put that link into the chat. It's a great resource. And when you get there, you're going to look for a tool called the Verifier. The Verifier is where you can find out what technology is being used in your county, in your state, in other states. Lots of information there. But I will tell you one thing about the verified voting website. It does not really tell you about problems with the voting machines. And that is one place where I think we really shine. If you go to Smart Elections, we really have a lot of information there about the different problems with technology. So I encourage you to look at our page at Smart Elections. There's a whole section on voting technology, a page on Dominion, a page on ES&S, a page on the system they have in LA. So you can really learn a lot about technology on the Smart Elections website, and I encourage you to go there as well. Okay, this is one of our hardest questions in the quiz right here before we're ending. A 2007 study in Ohio demonstrated security vulnerabilities of every voting machine in use in the state. What is the name of the study? Anybody get this one? This is a really tough one. And then after this, we'll have Amber do the totals and tell us who the winners are. We have one winner on Facebook. Yes, Matt Lucene, honest, Everest. Okay, now there's a bonus answer. Do you know Everest is, go Matt, Everest is an acronym. Do you know what the acronym stands for? Here's a quote about this Everest study. And here's one of the reasons why voting machine and security advocates, why security advocates are very concerned about voting machines. The 2007 Everest study is a really good example of that. And the study found that the Everest report of findings commissioned, oh, I just gave that away, darn it. The Everest report of findings commissioned by Ohio Secretary of State Jennifer L. Brunner finds that all of the computer-based voting
Everybody gets a
systems
page now.
in use in Ohio, all of the computer-based voting systems in use in Ohio do not meet computer industry security standards and are susceptible to breaches of security that may jeopardize the integrity of the voting process. Now, this is a study from 2007. In 2007, we already knew that most of the voting machines in use in Ohio, which actually was a good representative sample of voting machines that were in use across the entire country, did not meet computer industry security standards and were susceptible to breaches of security that may jeopardize the integrity of the voting process, which is a fancy way of saying may be giving you the wrong election results.
Yeah, we still use that. That's what Ohio had.
So this is why advocates are so suspect of voting machines, because when they are tested, they have been found often to be very, very vulnerable to security issues. And this is Matt Lucene again. This is why we should always be double checking the paper by hand. And many of us do advocate hand count audits. So we'll go just a little bit longer. Did anybody get that Everest acronym? I flashed it for a second, but I don't think anybody saw it. The Everest
Mark said
acronym.
I'm gonna get a pen, but no answers.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give people a few more minutes to get the
Awesome.
Everest acronym. I'm going to just like bust through it and then move on to audit. So yes, as Matt was saying, many of us are very, very adamant that we need to be doing more audits. This is a quick overview of different types of audits, and we have done many forums on audits. We encourage, at the end, we'll put up the playlist for all of our forums. Definitely check out the audits forums. I think they're some of the best. And these are just different types of audits. A full hand count audit, that's what you saw in Arizona, where they counted 2 million ballots by hand. Modified full hand count audit, that's what they did in Columbia County, New York for 10 years under the leadership of Virginia Martin, where they, Ed got it, where in Columbia County, they counted many of the ballots by hand, and it would depend on how tight the race was and how many ballots people wanted them to count. But they would certainly count until everybody was confident that the results were correct. What we see often in states are 1% and 3% flat percentage audits. In California, they have a 1% mandatory audit, although it's very weak. It's not counting many of the absentee ballots now. There's lots of sort of holes in that. And in New York, we have a 3% audit. Many of the counties are doing those with another machine now, no longer by hand. And then what many security experts are starting to recommend are risk limiting audits. Those are fairly complicated, and you might have a risk limit there. It can vary. Sometimes 95% risk limit is suggested, and that means that you have a 95% risk that that the wrong candidate would be confirmed, basically, is what that means. Again, those are pretty complicated, and I encourage you to watch the many episodes that we've done about audits, and we'll put the link up for our forums after this. So we did get a winner for that Everest question. Here, Ed got it. Everest is an acronym, that 2007 study, and it stood for Evaluation and Validation of Election-Related Equipment, Standards, and Testing. Nice job, Ed. Amber, can you? Ed used Google. Google is my friend.
Did he say that?
Yeah, he said. But it's actually tricky to find on Google sometimes. You have to know what you're looking for there. I had to actually look up the Everest report to get it. And then Emily made her own acronym. Every voter everywhere requires excellent systems today. I think you should definitely give Emily a point for that, Amber. I like the creativity in that. So that's a really good one. And then less than a quarter of states do a post-election audit that manually examines the paper ballots, which could catch an error in the election results. That's from the National Election Defense Coalition. So we're really not seeing states do the type of audits. They're not as robust as they need to be, and many states are really not some states are not doing audits at all. So that continues to be a problem. I want to show you the 2022 midterm calendar because it's coming up fast. So they are already going to be starting primary midterm elections in Texas in March. So here's your calendar. I'm just putting the link into the chat, and I'm going to share that screen with you very quickly. The calendar starts in March, and then the next one after that is in May. So we have a little bit of time there, but we really need to start getting organized, which is the main focus of our forum today, is to really get you on board and say, hey, this is work that I really want to be involved in. I feel passionate about this. I want to make sure that election results are counted accurately and that the public has confidence and that I have confidence. So you can see here, Texas is starting in March. I don't know, blow your screen up big if you can't see that. And then after that, we've got May in Indiana and Ohio, lots of states in the Midwest, Nebraska on the East, West Virginia, all through May. In June, you've got a lot of big states, California, New York is in June. In August, that's you, Benny, Tennessee, Hawaii and Alaska in August, and even a late one in September in Massachusetts. So
Are these just state primaries?
these are the state primaries, and then you get November, the national election day, November 8th. So we want to be working with you on these primaries for oversight, and we hope that you and your groups are going to be working with us. So, and Perry Busby saying their early voting is going on now in Texas. So what we've done is we've put together a Google form, and we want you to fill it out. It's a quick Google form. And if you want to work with us, then we want to work with you because we need volunteers to do this work together. And we've developed quite a few, is it showing that weird sign in to continue form? I thought I did sign in. That is not going to help us there. Let me show it to you in a different browser where I did sign in.
Why you didn't report abuse?
I'm reporting your abuse, Benny. You abused me this entire session.
You're a hacker. Just hack in. Shoot. The public want to see this. Hack in and get...
Okay, let me just show you the. The quiz. I'm sorry. Let me just show you the Google form that we want you to fill out. This is the Google form. If you want to work with us for the doing the midterm oversights, please go ahead and fill out this Google form. And you can also alternately just email us at contact@smartelections.us, and we will be reaching out to you. So I put that into the chat, and I think that I can also just kind of show you what it looks like. It's pretty basic. It's just a Google form like this, and you're going to just go ahead and fill that out. It's going to take you literally about 3 minutes. And we've developed quite a few techniques to help us monitor the midterms. In 2020, we monitored the elections in 14 states using poll tapes. We had volunteers take photographs of poll tapes. And then in 2021, we did a pilot that was very effective, where we compared the number of voters who voted with the number of ballots that were scanned in different precincts. And we found some very interesting information, including one precinct where it looked like there were almost 700 more ballots scanned than voters who voted. So that's a technique that we've developed that we think is very effective, and we're going to be using that quite a bit more during the midterm. So we want to teach you all about that, and we hope that you are going to fill out that form and connect with us. As I said, you can also reach out to us through our email, contact@smartelections.us. So that's our forum for today. I'm sorry that we went a little bit long, but I think we did really cover that. The material.
Sign up for the next show. It's going to be on March the 8th, right? And you can always look at our prior episodes. They're in the link below. So take a look.
Absolutely. And I will also put that link. I've been promising that link. So if you want to look at the different forums that we've done previously, there's so much information there for you. So go ahead and check out those forums. And this is the link to sign up for our next forum, which, as Benny said, is March 8th. You can sign up for up to 5 forums at a time. So just go ahead and sign up for them all. And that way we'll be sending you reminders and you won't miss it. And we are going to see you back here on March 8th and have more good times. So we need to announce our winners. Let's see. Amber is going to give us our winners for the quiz. Where is she? Amber. Great job participating. All quiz winners. George Ripley, 2 points. And a tie between Matt Lucine and Perry Busby, who said if he wins to give the pen to Benny. Benny, you got your pen.
No, y'all send them their pens. Lulu, you owe me a pen.
I
didn't realize I could get I realized I couldn't vote. So I thought it was one person, one vote. But
I am going to send Benny his own pen.
yeah.
I'm sure that is going to make everybody super, super happy. So
Yep,
thank
and if
you
it's not,
all.
I can't hold it up in the next show.
Thank you all so much for playing. Please, if you had a good time, if you learned a lot, go ahead and put that into the chat. We love those comments.
Yeah,
they
send us
really
feedback.
help us to let more people know about the program. And we had a really good time. So we hope to see you back here March 8th. And just
Send us the
remember,
feedback. We really want to know the feedback. I mean, if it's good, tell us. If it's not, tomato. Shout out Nick. Throw us tomatoes if it's not good.
throw us tomatoes. I'll make sure to pass them on to Benny. Okay, we love doing this with you. And just keep in mind, this is what democracy looks like. So thanks so much. We'll see you next time.